Okay, we're going to keep moving. Folks, we've got about an hour. Just a reminder, our sponsors are awesome. Make sure you give them some love out there. We're going to be moving on, navigating the complexities of the voluntary carbon market, the role of nature-based solutions in IWA dMRV. Jackson Ross, everyone give Jackson right here a big shout. He has been busting his butt all week, getting ready for these past two events. Thank you, and he's been great to work with. Jackson, are you ready? All right, the floor is yours.
All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for another wonderful session, and what I hope will be an insightful session for you all on navigating the complexities of voluntary carbon markets. We've heard a lot about that today, and want to continue to drill into that and talk about the importance of nature-based solutions and dMRV. We've talked a lot about dMRV today, and we plan to talk quite a bit more about it. It is an emerging area in this space, and I think that there's quite a bit to discuss around that topic. My name is Jackson Ross. As Dave was so kind to mention, I'm the Director of Technical Programs at GBBC, and I also head the InterWork Alliance, which we can talk about a little bit more. But first of all, I wanted to start off by letting my panelists introduce themselves, just a little bit about what you do and kind of your connection and interest in the topic that we have here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Francisca Garay. I'm ALLCOT IO's COO. ALLCOT is the digital division of ALLCOT Group, which is a carbon project developer that's been in the market for about 15 years with projects in Latin America and Africa and all different regions. And in the past couple of years, we've been integrating technologies, but also building our own platform based on technical capabilities provided by blockchain, and in particular, the Hedera Guardian ecosystem. So this topic is something we work on daily, and yeah, I'm happy to share more.
Hey everyone, my name is Wes Geisenberger. I help lead a group called the HBAR Foundation Sustainable Impact Funds. We're a grant-giving organization. In the Hedera ecosystem, we're focused on bringing the balance sheet of the planet to the public ledger. And I also chair the Carbon Emissions Token Task Force as part of the IWA, and have been a long-standing participant in the Voluntary Ecological Markets Task Force. And before I get any further on that, everyone should thank Jackson and the IWA team for the IWA work. It is not an easy job to get everyone together week after week, year after year. It is one of the most important working groups in the carbon markets. And so I'm really happy to be part of that, and a lot of this panel I know is going to focus on it, but just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Wes. And I also want to thank everyone who participates in it. I mean, for all of the work that goes on behind the scenes, none of it would be able to be accomplished without the expertise that we get from our members and those who participate.
And I would third that. My name is Karen Hardy. I'm the CEO of Nature Wired. We're a climate tech startup. And we are working towards a transparent marketplace that unites corporations with nature-based solutions that will have community impact. And I think that's something that's really important in terms of the transparency, which we'll talk more about. I am a member of the IWA task force for the voluntary carbon markets. I also want to thank Sandra and the GBBC team for inviting Nature Wired to be a sponsor. And I think both Jackson and Diana, if you meet Diana as well, she's doing amazing work with sustainability and supply chains. There she is.
Well, thank you all very much, and it's lovely to have you on the panel. I know Wes and Karen, I work with you very often, and Francisca, it's been great to get to know you and understand kind of what you're working on at ALLCOT. And I think to tee up this conversation and to set the scene a little bit, and in our conversations previous to this, Wes, we had talked about some of the kind of complexities, challenges, and considerations around the current state of voluntary carbon markets at kind of a data and technology level. And And I know that you always have really insightful thoughts into this. So I wonder if you could just kind of lay out the landscape for us.
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks see the voluntary carbon market and they see specific brands. But when you look at a carbon credit, it's the work of different communities and passing data forward, and that data has to be based on standards. Now, today and historically, those standards are written in PDF. You had Toby here from Vera earlier, but there's many other standards in the market. And those standards have been hard created. There's some folks who have written dozens and dozens and dozens of methodologies in PDF. And the data, the way it's been collected historically, has been in PDF and Excel from a variety of parties passing across the market. And there's always a question around, is this data leading to the activity that we're supposed to be accounting for in emissions reductions, avoidances, removals? And when we think about the market as a whole, the market has always struggled to relate that information in a way that's meeting what our expectations are today. A lot of times they're 140 character expectations, and these PDF documents of just the rules, sometimes they're 400 pages. And they're of complex formulas, calculations, different disciplines and domains that impact industries from a forestry perspective to a technical-based perspective, thinking about how methane emits from compost, or how we're avoiding emissions in that light. And so a lot of the questions lead to complex investigations, and those investigations don't always have all the context when a journalist is thinking about something in, when they have to turn a story in or over a period of a few months, if they have a lot longer to do a feature article. And the market always asks those questions because they want to make sure that the dollars are going to impact the activity that's being financed is looking to happen. And the market struggled with that for the past couple of years. The impact on prices, because people don't know if what is being attested is really happening. But there's also an opportunity in that to improve and innovate our systems. And I think that's also the thing that I'm excited about from the IWA perspective, is we know from the bottom up of how to change some of these things because we've gone and met with the parties to help address the challenges. And I think one of the things that to give the market confidence is working from the ground up to know every step of the way, who said what when. And there's great project developers who aren't just saying, well, the environmental integrity side of who said what when, or the SDG side of attestations of who said what when, but financially, are the dollars going to communities? And I'm really excited about the work that ALLCOT's doing on financial transparency tied to that, because those are the questions when we know dollars are going where they're supposed to for the activities that they're supposed to be addressing, we can address a lot of the tough challenges in the market. As science matures and we get new technologies, whether it's satellite data or eddy covariance data, for folks who know Hyphen, another member of the task force, is working on that technology. There's a lot of different technology that come to address issues, but those integrity challenges, we also have to translate every single piece of technology, every part of environmental science into the context and to meet people where they are, not just the corporate buyers at large corporations, but the folks who are working all throughout the value creation process it's the key step to getting the VCM back to a growth pattern that we all strive to achieve.
Thank you, Wes. And I think leading into that, and we've heard a lot about dMRV today, and I think some of the conversations we've been having recently is, what is dMRV? People talk about dMRV all the time. It means different things to different people, and sometimes, they may look at dMRV from a very narrow perspective of just the monitoring or measurement portion, instead of looking at kind of holistically what dMRV is as a whole. And so I just wanted to kind of go down, and we can start with Karen, and just, what dMRV means to you when you think about it. What are the benefits of dMRV, and compared to traditional MRV, what do you see as being that kind of progress that dMRV has made?
Sure. So Wes has already really touched on the traditional measurement, reporting and verification models, which has been very much a PDF process. And, I think there's been a spotlight in the last couple of years on MRV and the voluntary carbon markets. With the digital approach, there's an opportunity to bring in technologies. And I think 2024 is really creating a fresh start for this. When we look at things not just blockchain, but artificial intelligence. If we look at the automated process of measurement, bringing in sensors and satellites, then the reporting piece, bringing in advanced analytics, and allowing for machine learning to also create mechanisms for improvements to be highlighted. So that allows for the scientists, for the viewers to understand a little bit more and get greater insights. And then from a verification standpoint, bringing in blockchain, right? So blockchain creates that trusted transparency across that entire transaction. So to me, the digitized part of it is going to continue to evolve. You know, this is not a one and done, and we've got dMRV and that's it. It's going to continue to advance, and more of the processes are going to become automated. I mean, for those of you that were at Toby's talk earlier from Vera, he spoke about dMRV, and he spoke about, you know, how the processes will be brought in as part of these pilots that Vera's doing. And so, you know, we're going to see this continue to advance.
I think one thing we need to consider is going from where we have MRV to digitized to digital. And it's building that capacity along the way. Most of the project developers are still thinking about, how do I get my Excel sheet to a VVB in a way that is understandable? And then making sure that what the VVB submits then to the standard is going to meet the requirements of the standard. And it's going to take time. Many of these projects have existed in some way, shape, or form for years, with millions of dollars of finance to have an expectation. But I think the opportunity is to use technology to help improve integrity, and that's where dMRV comes into play. And so when we take ways to standardize how we bring this data in, for example, in the Red Plus category, and I mentioned Hyphen earlier, but they look at both atmospheric monitoring from a satellite perspective, but on the ground truth with the eddy covariance sensors that they're standing up, and they have to stand up a few towers in a forest to be able to understand how the forest breathes or respirates. That's one M. It's the monitoring, measurement and monitoring of that data. They use AI to help predict what that looks like across an entire forest, a large area. But the opportunity is to make sure that that same data, as it passes through, is reported, validated approach, verified for submission, so that when it comes through, it's that same data set and not another PDF, another Excel sheet, passed, and there's opportunities for error. And I think that's our opportunities to build a streamlined system that we can get to issuance faster with less headaches going back and forth, because these workflow systems that have to be built, they exist inside probably almost every company that everyone here's worked at or will work at. But in this case, it's a multi-party system, a multi-party workflow, and that's the power of where public ledgers can come in to enable dMRV. They lower the cost of trust across all these parties.
Thank you for that, Wes and Karen. And then, Francisca, I want you to also, talk about what dMRV means to you, but also maybe tie it into some more grounded practical use cases that you're seeing at ALLCOT.
Sure. I would like to invite you all to kind of like simplify the conversation here, and we're talking about data, right? A lot of data. And there's a lot of big words and acronyms, both in the environmental world and the technical world. But what we are trying to do is bring data from the ground to the ledger. And in order to do that, dMRV and digital integrations in general are making our life easier in a lot of ways, but also are bringing so many benefits to the market in general. So I want to quote, I hope I pronounced his name right, I don't know if he's here. I met yesterday in a panel the former CTO of IBM North America, Gurvinder Singh. He's a blockchain pioneer, and he was saying data is mostly analog, right? When we go to a forest to do a forest inventory, the trees are analog, and the birds are, and the sounds are, and we need to collect this data and digitalize it in order to manage it, in order to analyze it, to answer a set of questions very specific questions in a methodology. So when we convert this data into a digital format, we can transmit the information. Especially, I wanna talk a little bit about the product that we're building. As I mentioned, it's called Stratos, and it's basically a data engine that collects the data in the whole life cycle of a carbon project, and then it's all recorded in the blockchain. So what that does is bring this immutability, transparency, traceability that we're all looking for. And the framework for dMRV exactly does that. It allows us to have a set of rules, so we are speaking the same language. And that's why at the beginning I said I want to simplify the conversation, because I think that's what sometimes is lacking, and that's why I think the work that you're doing is super valuable in getting us together in speaking the same language.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing about that, because I think you're right. There's so many acronyms, and there's a lot of different discussions that are very high level. But at the end of the day, it's good to have kind of a grounded view of what's actually going on. And like you said, at the end of the day, someone's having to go out into those forests and measure the sound, count the trees, do these things. There are ways to automate that, but at the end of the day, it does start at a very kind of grassroots level. And so, you have to start there before you can get to these larger dMRV kind of frameworks and systems. And I appreciate your comments about kind of the standardization. And I wanted to actually hand it back over to Wes and Karen to kind of talk about some of the work that we've done within the IWA. And I know that both of you, you participate within the IWA's working groups, but also with other standards bodies and other organizations in the space. So I just wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about the importance of standards in this space. What does that enable and what does that allow? And then also, if you want to speak directly to some of the IWA work, that would be great as well.
Okay. So first of all, how many of you have heard of the InterWork Alliance digital dMRV? Okay. All right. So we've got a good portion of you. And how many of you have actually implemented using the dMRV framework? Excellent. Okay, we got a couple. Well, I think one of the opportunities around the framework itself, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wes. This has been available for about 3 years now, and it's continued to be a community that have provided feedback and insights and updates to this framework. But what the framework provides, first of all, is it provides a set of rules and guidelines for MRV data for sustainability. Secondly, it allows for interoperability of systems and platforms. So you can have multiple different layer 1 blockchains, for example, or different platforms and systems, technologies that can all work together. And that creates a common language. And thirdly, it allows for stakeholders to really understand the data and make informed decisions. So I think this is such a valuable framework and tool that has continued. And Wes, the demonstration you showed earlier was amazing, because that's how it's really been formed and created, is around this framework. So what does standards ultimately do? It kind of levels the playing field. If we think about the voluntary carbon market for nature-based solutions, it's really been about a lot of large projects. And the smaller landowners or the smaller opportunities for nature-based projects haven't been able to really get into the voluntary carbon market because of the costs. And what dMRV and what this framework really enables is for those landowners to be part of this. I think that standards also creates a way in which we can break down some of the barriers. the challenges between the buyers and the suppliers and all the intermediaries that are in between the voluntary carbon market, we can start to have common terminology and a common language and a common understanding. And I think that's really important in terms of where we are right now and what benefit this can bring for climate change.
I really like what you said about the smallholder farmers and being able to get into the market. One of the first grant we actually did out of our fund was with a company called Dovu, who was one of the first references in the voluntary ecological markets, task force's standard. And they actually took these definitions, these taxonomies, and they laid them out in their workflow, which is built on the Guardian. And the reason why we did it was because they could take that audit trail, the methodology that's been digitized, and they could make it explainable to the end buyers. And they were working with farms that was as small as 2 acres. I've never seen a credit. There's not a lot of credits issued when farms that small, but I've never seen a credit issued for a smaller project. It wasn't about having a tens of thousands of dollars verification process, but at that size, they were able to get premium prices for their credits because they were showing that the impact was real. They were still getting lab tests. They were still doing different processes you expect in validation verification, but they were doing it on a much smaller scale. Now that was, I think, a proof of concept at that level, that size. But as we scale up at a technical level, we have these definitions, and I want to give a big shout out to some of the members of the Dovu was one of the first to ever take this to market and use. But there's a lot of other members, including Microsoft and Marley Gray and some of the other longtime members. I know Stan from Recycle Go is a longtime member of that group. They put in a lot of effort to define all the terms of the market that folks take for granted, even definitions of permanence, durability, additionality, leakage, and building that out to long-form definitions that I can label on my technical systems so that when you look across a standard, whether it's Vera, Gold Standard, CDM, they mean the same thing categorically. So when we go to build technical systems, we can put the right labels on the different data attributes that lead to the actual asset attributes in a credit. And I think the opportunity is because we can work across the different technical systems, taxonomically, we're in a really good place. And we talk a lot about the TTF token taxonomy framework, but it's not just about tokens. We're looking at all the MRV that leads to the token, the methodology labels, all the properties that come out of that. How should we work on I think we're calling it a verification process agreement, of the process for verification and all the different data steps that go in between. Those different definitions are the underpinning of how the market needs to think about building technical systems, because if we all verify things technically a different way, we're building black boxes. If we all use the same technical labels, even if we build 2 separate open source systems, or even somebody builds a closed source system, it can be rationalized across the board. So if a carbon credit's built on the process that we're taking from PDF or Excel to digital step by step by step by step, if we don't have a digital translator every single step of the way, we don't know what that process is leading to, because we don't know what happened looking backwards. And the way that credits work is we value the activity usually after it happens. But if we can't prove agnostically what happened for the last 3-5 years in a credit's creation through the systems that they're collecting data in, we don't necessarily know what's in the credit.
Yeah, and I think you get to a good point there about we can talk about the structure of the tokens and the taxonomy around that, but at the end of the day, the token is only as good as the data that goes into it. And so I think that's been really one of the really good things that's come out of the group in the last year, is getting more into the dMRV process and really drilling into, we have these good definitions that can help to create interoperable systems and easier to deploy systems, but the entire process around getting those also has to be well defined, because otherwise, like you said, you need to know where that data came from, that it's legitimate, that it's valid, that it's been checked and verified, and all of the kind of provenance that goes along with that. So yeah, and I think it goes far beyond taxonomy. I mean, it's more process definition and working with, within the existing system to map out how you do these things, while also trying to find where these new technologies and things can also help to, increase efficiencies. And so I think that and I want to be mindful of time here, and I think it would be good to just understand, what do you see in the future for voluntary carbon markets? What do you want to see? What do you expect to see? If you want to give, 1, 5, 10 years, if you can think 10 years ahead in this space, I don't know if that's even possible at this point, but I just wanted to understand kind of what your vision is for, over the coming years, what we can expect to see or what you want to see out of this space.
Okay, I'm gonna go with expectation or wish. Going back to my original point, I would like to, all of us, technology, environmental, everyone related to the market, to have a common language, and for technology to actually, be able to support the action on the ground. I was talking before about how we're collecting data from the ground to the ledger. Being able to see how it's the other way around as well, how the ledger brings all of these benefits to the ground. I think it's the goal.
Thank you.
I think I want to build on that, and it's a two-way conversation. We hear a lot about in the market from groups like the ICVCM about what the quality of credit should be, which methodologies are okay. But going back to having a conversation, why can't some of the folks who are developing projects or communities on the ground or groups of communities on the ground who maybe are from the global south versus maybe global north-driven stakeholders who are buying the credits, help have that conversation in a way where they can say, these are the attributes, the things that I value. It could be in biodiversity. It could be in other areas in social or economic development. I was with Fran visiting a community in Senegal who's planting mangroves. And I remember one of the more surprising things was the first dollars that they wanted to spend were on sending their kids to be able to play soccer. And we visited a different community in Cote d'Ivoire the week prior, and we found out that community, they valued what they were doing so much from the carbon markets from a community perspective. They were taking their own money, even without the dollars from carbon credits, and spending it on conservation so that they could basically plant mangroves so that they could have better fish hatcheries so that the fish would come back, the birds would come back, they were protecting their ecosystem. The values that we think of that a carbon credit provides to a company buying it of an emissions reduction, on the other side may be sustainable development. And I would love to see that conversation find its way back to being a two-way conversation versus a one-way buyer-driven discussion.
I love that. Ultimately, I think companies they can't just decarbonize, and the investment in nature is key. And unfortunately, nature is making up 30% of the climate solution, but it's only getting 10% investment. And I listened to a lot of panels yesterday that talked about legislation and regulation, and there's a mismatch, going to your point, Wes, between what's on the ground and what's needed. And so I think there is this opportunity for more automated processes to happen, more technology to be brought in to the equation that can really break down the conversations that are lost right now, I think, between what is assumed is needed and what the reality is of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you very much. And I know that
I think we hope that's going to happen in the next year.
I hope so.
Because we need it.
I hope so. Well, I know that we're running short on time, but I wanted to thank my panelists here for joining me. If we could get a round of applause for these lovely panelists here. And one final thing that I wanted to leave with you all is, as part of the IWA's working group that's looking at dMRV, we have a survey. So for anyone who's working in traditional MRV, dMRV, we would love to get feedback on what you're seeing, what your experience is with either traditional or digital or digitized MRV. The QR code here will take you to the survey. Also, a link to the survey can be found on GBBC's LinkedIn and X. Post should be coming out here in the next few minutes. So we would love any feedback that you have on that work, because that kind of informs what we continue to look for and help to define for future versions of the framework. And I know that Wes and Karen and the whole IWA team would really appreciate some feedback from people who are implementing these things on the ground and more practically. So thank you all very much for joining today, and look forward to more wonderful panels.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, two more panels, folks. Thank you for sticking with us today. It's toward the end, feeling good.